So we move to chapter 6. We have a court case. God is going to court and taking the Israelites, and he's declaring all that he's done, that he is innocent, or he has fulfilled all of his obligations that we've heard about from the Abrahamic covenant going forward. And then he asks the questions about, have the people been loyal to me? Have they kept the covenant? And so all these questions, these rhetorical questions, are essentially answered no. God has been completely loyal and faithful, and the people haven't. So it's this lawsuit. Who ultimately is going to be charged with wrongdoing? Is it God, or is it the people who have rejected the waters of Shiloah that flow so sweetly?
Isn't that fun how the Lord puts you in a very interesting position as the reader here in chapter 6? He lets you sit in the seat of judgment, basically, and he's going to put on this court case, and he's going to show some evidence, and he's going to make some arguments, and you get to be the judge and the jury. So he's going to ask you questions. Obviously, he's asking Israel these questions through Micah, but we as Latter-day readers can obviously apply that to us as well in our time today. I love these questions where at the bottom of verse 2, he says, "For the Lord hath a controversy with his people, and he will plead with Israel." Okay, so we're going to enter this pleading. Verse 3, "O my people, what have I done unto thee? And wherein have I wearied thee? Testify against me. Bring forth your evidence. Where have I done these things?" Verse 4, "For I brought thee up out of the land of Egypt, and I redeemed thee out of the house of servants, and I sent before thee Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. O my people, remember now what Balak, king of Moab, consulted, and what Balaam, the son of Beor, answered him from Shittim unto Gilgal. For that ye may know the righteousness of the Lord." He's showing all of it. I have done the right thing at every step. That's it. He's putting the evidence in front of the courtroom.
And he presents his side of the case. I have kept up my side of the covenant, my side of the contract. He gives his evidence, right? Several pieces of evidence where he helped them escape. He gave them people to lead them. He helped them deal with people like Balaam and Balak. He helped them cross the Jordan River. That's what this last one is about. And now it's the defendant's turn to defend themselves. And this is not really a good defense that Israel comes up with here.
"Wherewith shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before the high God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings and with calves of a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, or with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He hath shewed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee? But to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God." So the Israelites had this very complex sacrificial system, and God asked them to perform sacrifices. But it makes it really clear here, no amount of these rituals will save you. Ultimately, it's the loyalty to God because you have loved God and loved your neighbor. So we ask ourselves today, is it enough for me to be active in the church? Is it enough for me to be a 100% home teacher? I know we don't use those phrases anymore. Those are all good things. The question is that ultimately what this is all about? Am I choosing justice and mercy and loving God and my neighbor in all instances, or am I just performing outward acts that make me and others think that I'm saved? So we're not asking anybody to stop going to church, but we are asking all of ourselves, is that all that God requires? And this lawsuit puts the question quite poignantly to all of us. Is it just the outward acts, or is my heart truly turned to things that are true, just, merciful, and of God?
Such a powerful reminder of, is it the act of going to church that's saving me? Or is it Christ who's going to save me? And because he's going to save me, part of the way of helping to shape me is giving me these commandments to go to church, to read my scriptures, to pray, to go to the temple, and to do justly to people around me. None of those acts is going to save me. It's the Savior who is going to save me. But how does he change us? How does he manifest his grace? If we appropriately go through all of those actions for the right reasons, not just going through the motions. It's a powerful reminder for us from Micah.
Yeah, and I think it makes us step back and think about, am I just going through the motions, or am I doing justly, loving mercifully, and walking humbly with God? So we know when the Savior came and he instituted the gospel, It was about, in what's inherent, what's inside, not just about the outward actions. That's important too, but it was about the purpose, the meaning. What were these actions pointing to? And this is what he's trying to say here. And if you look at this, these are the two great commandments are sort of hidden in here, right? Love others, love God, love yourself. Help others, have mercy, walk with God. He cares about obedience and taking care of each other. That's kind of what this comes down to. Sacrifice is important, but of course, we already mentioned this. The new sacrifice is very much internal, right? It's very much internal. And I love that even though we like to look at the law of Moses as very much about ritual and action, they already knew that it was deeper than that. They understood that it was more than that.
Yeah. Which, by the way, as you get into the second part of chapter 6, he's going to lay some things out pretty clearly. And to me, it's this idea of I really ultimately have a choice to make. I'm either going to do my will or I'm going to seek to do God's will. And you get this example of people doing what's in it for them. What am I going to benefit from? And so some of these practices here in verse 11 and 12, shall I count them pure with the wicked balances and with the bag of deceitful weights? So back then, if you're going to buy food or grain or barter or exchange for anything that you want to buy, if it's sold by weight, then they would have these balances, these scales set up, and they've figured out ways to rig these balances to be wicked balances with deceitful weights, so that they can rip you off. You're not getting as much as you actually paid for.
In ancient Babylon, they had a weight that was shaped like a sleeping duck, because a sleeping duck is one of the most innocuous, non-threatening things out there. And it was to remind the merchants and the buyers that this transaction should not be fraught with conflict. It should be like a sleeping duck that doesn't threaten anybody.
Verse 12, for the rich men thereof are full of violence, and the inhabitants thereof have spoken lies, and their tongue is deceitful in their mouth. So what happens because of this? Therefore also will I make thee sick in smiting thee, in making thee desolate because of thy sins. And then this hauntingly powerful prophecy, verse 14, thou shalt eat, but not be satisfied. And thy casting down shall be in the midst of thee. And thou shalt take hold, but shall not deliver. And that which thou deliverest will I give up to the sword. It's that idea of if you do your will instead of God's will, ultimately it's going to be like eating, or if you want to use the Isaiah analogy of dreaming in a night vision of eating or drinking a hungry or a thirsty man, and then waking up and saying, I'm still famished, I'm still thirsty. You can go through the motions of all of these things, whether they be even in a spiritual context, making sacrifices and doing these rituals that were prescribed by the law of Moses. But if you're just going through the motions to be seen of people or to gain the rewards of the earth or doing your own will, it's going to be like eating a meal, but not ever feeling full, not ever getting the nutrients from the meal.
Yeah, and sometimes this is called a futility punishment. You will keep trying to do things. You'll try to eat, you'll never be filled. You'll try to sow in verse 15, but not reap. And I feel like this is sometimes what sin does to us. It holds us back from being successful. It holds us back from, getting to the point where we want to be, to growing and to developing. And it becomes futile to keep doing things without the proper reasoning, the proper purpose.
So eventually we have to say, Lord, not my will, but thine be done.
Yeah, which is what we talked about with Jonah. It's perfect, right? Jonah wanted to go one way, and then he came back, and they can come back too.